Hey guys, good evening. I couldn't get over what I saw from earlier this week. Does the name Kayla Ard mean anything to you?
Who?
I think so.
Okay, so she is the Utah State women's head coach
Oh,
who
oh,
got
oh.
watched during the post game interview that she had on Sunday. They said,
Yes, I
"How are
saw
you going to
that.
rebuild this team?" And she said, "I'm not going to rebuild this team. I just got let go." So guys, don't attend any post game press conferences tonight, just in case. I'm Steve Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan, and the only press conference I'm going to is this one.
And I'm Anthony Strait, and no one has offered me an invite to be the vice president this week. Next week could be a different story.
Lucky for you.
Welcome to On the Sports Slides, our 2024 Bracketology edition. And unlike a certain special vice presidential candidate, there are no actors being portrayed in this show, just real people.
Ooh.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, and you don't even have to buy presents. We give you the presents in the form of bracketology. Smack in the sort of middle of Conference Champ Week, we'll tell you who's near the top of the seed lines, closer to the middle, and those who will have to sneak in, which may or may not involve alma maters on this panel. But first, let's start at the top. Sure, no one seeds made the Final Four a year ago, or two seeds, or three seeds. But being on the one line of the bracket is huge for success, usually in the tournament. At least you're guaranteed to win your first round game, unless you're Purdue in 2023. Speaking of, Zach Edey's fighting Boilermakers, defending national champ UConn, and Houston, who only won an outright Big 12 title in their debut year, no big deal, are going to be on that one line in less than 72 hours. But by rule, by law, we need four number one seeds. So let's make the case for that last one. Jay, after a nightmare 2022-23, which, by the way, includes two players who have won Conference Player of the Year this year because Caleb Love transferred to Arizona and got that Conference Player of the Year along with RJ Davis. This season is just not has not been blue, Carolina blue, of course, for the North Carolina Tar Heels. Make the case.
They're currently the highest seeded number 2 seed in pretty much all according to all of the major bracketologists. They're the number 1 seed for the ACC tournament. I mean, their numbers kind of speak for themselves, but obviously I'm going to get deeper into it. 25-6 record, regular season record, 17-3 in the ACC, outright regular season champs. They went 8-3 out of conference, 14-1 at home, 8-2 on the road, 3-3 in neutral games. Their net is 7, KPI is 5, strength of record is 4, BPI 11, KenPom 8, strength of schedule, net 25, non-conference SOS is 22. They're 7-4 in quad 1, 2-3 in the non-conference is kind of where they struggled at the early part of the season, 6-2 in quad 2, and 7-0 in quad 3, 5-0 in quad 4. The last two, they were combined 6-0 out of conference. Had some really big wins this year. They beat Tennessee at home, which is a Q1 win. They swept Duke. That's a pair of quad ones right there. They knocked off Oklahoma and Clemson. Both of those are quad 1 wins, one on neutral, one on the road. They had some what you would qualify as good losses. They lost to UConn on a neutral court. They lost to Kentucky on a neutral court. Villanova on a neutral court, and Clemson at home. So bad losses. Nothing outside of Q1 or Q2. Q2 loss on the road to Syracuse, who had a net of 79. And, there was that Q2 loss to Georgia Tech, who has a net of 122. That's probably their worst loss of the year in terms of that. As far as KenPom's efficiency numbers go, they're number 8 in the country in adjusted efficiency margin at plus 25.12. Number 26 in adjusted offensive efficiency, 118.4, and number 5 in adjusted defensive efficiency, 93.2. First time as a KenPom top 5 defensive unit since 2011. Now, just to clarify for you guys, what is about to follow, I wrote Monday after the regular season ended to set the stage for their first round conference tournament game tonight. So Depending on how their ACC tournament goes, North Carolina's non-conference home win over number 5 Tennessee back in November might serve as the de facto tiebreaker, depending on how the Vols do in the SEC tournament. Most of the big-name bracketologists that I referred to, namely Brian Bennett of The Athletic, Mike DeCourcy at Fox, and Joe Lunardi at ESPN, are so far sticking with the Vols for that final number 1 seed, with the prevailing school of thought being that they have better wins, a better resume, and played in a tougher conference, though the SEC is ranked number 3 in the net. The ACC is ranked number 4. Now, I don't know if the Tar Heels need to win the ACC tournament, but I think beating number 11 Duke on Saturday, adding a final Q1 road win against a team with a net of 10 to their resume, while Tennessee lost to number 9 Kentucky, which is a Q1 home loss to a team with a net of 19, and Arizona losing, number 6 Arizona losing to USC. That was a Q2 road loss to a team with a net of 91, though the Wildcats got some revenge tonight. Gives the Tar Heels the inside track, in my opinion, for that final number 1 seed. Strength of that team, surprisingly enough, it is their defense, which I referred to when I ran down that resume, which is not how a UNC team is normally defined, right, guys? Historically, the Heels lead with their offense, pushing the pace, getting out in transition, even after opponent made baskets, owning the offensive glass to create second chance points, getting to the line so often that they hit more free throws than their opponents attempt. Now, don't get me wrong. ACC Coach of the Year, Hubert Davis's squad can still score the basketball as any team in the country. Their 81.6 points per game is 22nd in the nation, and their 78.7 points per game in ACC play was number 1, led by shooting guard R.J. Davis, the ACC's Player of the Year and leading scorer at a little over 21 points per game. Davis had 19 games this season with 20 or more points, the most by a Tar Heel since Justin Jackson had 19 in 2016-17, and he also won the league's Player of the Year award that year. Behind center Armando Bacot and power forward Harrison Ingram, they led the ACC in offensive rebounding, defensive rebounding, and total rebounding. They were number 1 in the ACC in free throws made and free throws attempted, all of which should translate to the NCAAs. But that defense that I referred to held ACC opponents to just 68.2 points per game, 39.5% shooting-wise from the floor, and 30.7 from beyond the arc. All were tops in the conference. Nationally, they held opponents to 40.4 from the floor, 31.3 from 3, averaged as many free throws made as their opponents took, out-rebounded their opponents by almost 7 per game, and allowed them just 70.1 points per game. The Heels passed all the tests in my humble opinion. Record, the loss to UConn in early December was their only double-digit loss of the season, and the 4-point loss to Kentucky that followed was their only losing streak all season. They never lost 2 in a row in ACC play. Adaptive and predictive metrics is noted above. Number 1 seed worthy as far as I'm concerned. The eyeball test. They had very few bad stretches once they found their stride. Talent-wise, Davis, Bacot, and Ingram, first, second, and third, each represented the Heels on an all-ACC team. Bacot was ACC all-defense. Point guard Elliot Cadeau made all-ACC rookie team. Say what you want about the strength or lack thereof of the ACC. This team is worthy of a number 1 seed. Now, as I said, they came into the conference tournament number 1 in the bracket, and they smoked Florida State 92-67 in their 23rd ACC tournament win by 20-plus points, most by any team. They led at the half by 16 and 1 going away. Davis, 18 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal. Bacot, 14 points, 10 rebounds, including 6 on the offensive end. Ingram, 9 points, didn't have any in the second half, but he had 10 boards with 5 on the offensive end. Cormac Ryan coming off that high of a 31-point and 6 triple game against Duke. Chipped in 14 points. He went 3 for 4 from beyond the arc. They held FSU to 4 of 16 from 3, 25 for 61 overall from the floor. That's 41%. They themselves shot 34 of 65. They shot 52% from the floor, 42% from beyond the arc, and 80% from the line. They had 23 points off FSU's 12 turnovers. Free throw differential, they went 16 of 20. FSU 13 of 18. It was a lot more skewed in the first half. 10 of 11, 2, 3 for 3. Rebound differential, 49-24. 18 offensive rebounds for the Heels. FSU didn't reach double digits in the rebound column until the 11-minute mark of the second half. They had 26 fast break points, a season high. Points in the paint, 46 to FSU's 24. ESPN Seth Greenberg said, post-game quote. Think about the national championship Carolina teams. Old, tough, physical, rebound, run, and post the ball. This team showed all of that throughout the year and definitively in this win, as well as the suffocating defense they've hung their hat on all season. Sounds weird for me to say that. UNC didn't need to make a statement in their first game of the ACC tournament, but they did. And like I said at the top, I don't know if they need to win the ACC tournament to claim that final number one seed. A Pittsburgh team that's fighting to get off the bubble and has beaten UNC 5 of the last 7 times they've played, though not this season, is up next in the semis, and they will not be an easy out. But if the Tar Heels do take home their 19th ACC tournament title, then I think they'll have earned that final number one seed.
They do need to win their tournament straight up, because I think it's such a flip-flop between North Carolina and Tennessee. Yes, North Carolina also, as I'll talk about in a second. By the way, Anthony, I'm going to go next on this because I just realized this just, as Jay had told me, this actually just makes most sense. North Carolina did beat Tennessee earlier this year in the Dean Dome. Early in the year, November 29th, lost one great game. It was 192. And Tennessee has again, November basketball. It's weird, but it does still qualify. Both teams have actually played at pretty much a high level since then. Tennessee has no real bad losses. Their only quad 2 loss was to South Carolina, and that was back in January. They're now a quad 1 team by definition, and they beat one at South Carolina. It was actually their last regular season win last Wednesday. Tennessee is a team that has pretty much all of the numbers that you would like. 5 net, 6 KenPom, average net win obviously 107. It's low, but again, a 24-7 record, 8-3 away, 2-2 in neutral courts. There's really no bad losses for this team in what is one of the best conferences in America. They're ranked number 3. And again, their losses are pretty normal for a team. They lost at Texas A&M. That's probably their worst loss. They lost by 16. Every other game is a single-digit loss. The worst of them might be that Kentucky game on Saturday where they came in as a 6.5-point favorite. And despite Dalton Connect scoring 40, they still ended
40
up
of their
losing
81. That's never a good recipe.
It's not a good recipe, but it
not
was
against
just
Kentucky anyway.
No, and Connect has 5 games this year with 35 points or more. He's probably going to be the runner-up of the Wooded Zaki for Purdue. There's not a lot you can say about the Northern Colorado transfer. He was the player of the year in that conference last year. He is better this year. He actually upped his scoring average by 2 points per game. He's now a 25.5 point scoring average, and that's the most in the SEC in 14 years. The last person to do it was in 2009, 2010. He has 5 of the league's top 9 scoring performances this entire season.
Is he a shoe-in for SEC Player of the Year, Rabbi, or do you think he has some competition?
No, he won SEC Player of the Year.
Okay.
It was a shoe-in for Player of the Year. They do those awards before the conference tournaments. Scoring 21.4 points per game. What I said beforehand was an SEC play. He shoots over 40% from 3-point range, and he is pretty much the strength of this team. Now, even though, yes, 41 points on Saturday for the rest of the team, there is still 2 all SEC players. Jonas Aldu, who is one of the better players in this league when it comes to just he had a career high in minutes, rebounds, blocks, steals, points, all of them an upgrade from last year. Gives a strong defensive and scoring presence down low. He's a junior. He could do a very good job leading his team next year. SEC Defensive Player of the Year, and also first team SEC in Zakai Ziegler, who is a 5'9" guard who is just all over the court. He also is a guy who shoots 40% from the field. He had an ACL tear about a year ago, forced him to miss the entire postseason run, but he is on his game this year. The biggest thing I think in this whole thing is if you're going to talk about a North Carolina versus Tennessee comparison, which this might get down to. Joe Lunardi has said, in fact, just said it on a broadcast that I had seen at the Big 12 halftime. This is going to be a tortoise, and this is going to be a hair and a hair race. You're going to see one get the leg up. You're going to see one get the leg up pretty much until we get to Selection Sunday. If both end up winning their conference, I think this is going to be Tennessee's, just because of the fact that Tennessee could have a path. We'll start with Mississippi State tomorrow in their quarterfinal game. Mississippi State is a team that's going to make the tournament, probably as a 10 seed. They're going to play a pretty good team in the second round. They're going to play South Carolina or Auburn. Both of those teams have probably top 4, top 5 seeding potential. South Carolina is one of the most improved teams in the country this year. Paris Campbell, their coach, just got himself coach of the year in the SEC. He got himself a contract extension until 2030 because of the work that he did this year. South Carolina, I think it runs through the water having very good college programs. If you see the women's team this year, we might actually mention that a little bit later in our rant. Also, though, there's just so much. And you also have the chance to play a Kentucky team again and avenge that loss, or play an Alabama team that was a 1 seed a year ago and kind of reloaded and was one of the surprises in the league. I think that's the big key. The fact that while they're 7-6 in quad 1, there's really no bad losses. There's a chance that every team that they lost to, they do have a 3-game losing streak in there, by the way, but those 3 games were Purdue, Kansas, and North Carolina, all on neutral or road courts. And again, those were way back in November. Wasn't even
Kansas was actually Kansas.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in just a second too. Kansas was Kansas a long time ago, but again, I was only 38 at the time of that losing streak beginning. Yes, that's right. I hadn't even celebrated a birthday. A birthday happened a long time. So I think Tennessee has about as good of a resume as North Carolina does. They do have the better conference, though. I don't think that is a question right now. And they have the better path, and they have the better possibility for wins than North Carolina does.
They also have a bigger possibility for losses, though, in that tournament.
They do, but if North Carolina loses, that's pretty much going to be a death knell to them. As much as Pitt is a good team, they're on the bubble. As much as Boston College and NC State are good teams, they're on the bubble. Virginia's on the bubble. There's no one solid team out there.
Got bounced tonight.
Yeah, and Clemson got bounced yesterday, and that's the only other team with a resume right now, which is firmly into the ACC tournament. It's really a neck-and-neck race. Now, to be fair, Anthony, if both of those stumble, Arizona with Caleb Love immediately just having a very good season in Arizona. We thought he needed a change of scenery. That was definitely the case.
Didn't see this coming though.
Yeah,
Make your case for the champions of the West. Sorry, Michigan, and that would be the Arizona Wildcats. And that would be the Arizona Wildcats. Michigan doesn't even live in the West. I don't get it. Don't give me this history.
Yeah, sorry about that. The audio for some reason was
slightly
delayed. So
that's fine.
The irony of this is what I was going to say is the irony is that I talked about Arizona during our preseason show talking about college basketball and Caleb Love transferring, and nobody thought he would be this good this right away to be the conference player of the year for the Pac-12. By the way, this is the final Pac-12 conference championship tournament with Arizona looking for the 3-peat. So they're going into the tournament at 24-7, 15-5 in the conference. Their net is 4. Ken Palm is at 6. They have 83 record in Q1. Quad 2 is 6-3. Now here's the thing: in quads 3 and 4, they have 1 loss, but the 1 loss happened to be to Oregon State. And you talk about the 2 teams that's kind of the chasing, but I find out number 1. Tennessee, North Carolina, they don't have a quad 3 or 4 loss to their resume. So that's something to kind of keep it in perspective. Also, just 6 days ago, they lost a really bad performance. Lost by 13 to USC on the road. Now, they avenged that loss this afternoon to kick off their quest to 3P as a Pac-12 conference championship with a emphatic and convincing win. Um, no, in the Pac-12 in the quarterfinals of the Pac-12
Yeah.
tournament. When you look at the Wildcats, they have to win out. They just have to win the tournament and hope for help outside, even for. But they need both Tennessee and North Carolina to stumble. But when you look at the conference bracket, Washington State and Colorado, who would have given the Wildcats a chance to kind of pick up a couple of quad one wins, are on the same bracket and on the opposite end. They would play each other in the next round. Arizona gets Oregon, which would help as far as window dressing, but it won't exactly help the quad one resume. So they're just gonna have to win out and hope that Tennessee and North Carolina both stumble. As far as trying to get that number one, that USC loss really is lingering over them right now. As you speak, according to Joe Lodari, he pretty much said that they played themselves out of that one spot with that disappointing performance. But when you look at the West region, I mean, as far as where Arizona would be if they were a two, doesn't seem to turn out so bad. I mean, they would be in Salt Lake City for the first two rounds. They get to the Sweet 16. They go to Los Angeles, the Crypto.com Arena, and if they get to the Final Four, it's a bus ride to Glendale, Arizona. So I'm thinking, like, so if you're the Wildcats, yes, that number one would be that overall number one, that last number one spot would be great. But if you're number two, it doesn't seem so bad when you think about geographically. It actually works in your favor because every game will pretty much feel more like a home game because of the proximity to the campus. I mean, Arizona is a 3-hour drive to Los Angeles, and Salt Lake City is not much of a commute as well. So for the
And they
Wildcats,
travel
it's
very,
pretty
and
much
Arizona travels very, very well, as you'll
very
see when
well.
they make
Yes,
the
this
Big 12
afternoon.
next year.
Yeah, this afternoon it didn't really feel like much of a neutral site game. It was a very pro Arizona Wildcat crowd in Las Vegas for that game. So it's pretty much simple for the Wildcats. They have to win out and hope for help.
Yeah, I think one thing that's interesting about Arizona in this Pac-12 last dance is there's just no real opportunities in season to really get wins like that. But like in the beginning of the season, the win at Duke early in the year, I know. Again, this is way, way early in the year. It was the second game, and it was a huge win. The Wisconsin game and Alabama, even the loss to Purdue, they had a 1-point loss against Florida Atlantic. I think this Arizona team is really, really good. And I want to also caution this. Being a one seed could even be more harmful. Obviously, only 2 losses ever to a 16 team. But I always feel, at least, and we'll talk about this next week, every underseeded team always ends up as an 8 seed, which is weird. It happened with Kentucky the year when Wichita State went undefeated, and I always fear there's like there's always a major conference team that always, or a minor conference team or a mid-major that always ends up in that 8-9 line, and nobody wants to play them, and it always ends up going to the number one seed. Could be a battle tested thing, but it's something that's really concerning in a lot of different ways for some of these teams.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it next week, obviously. But the 8-9 matchup is like the equivalent to the NBA's 4-5 matchup. Like it's pretty much a team that could have easily been a top seed, but because there were 3 other teams better, that they just happened to fall into that bracket. I mean, 8-9 matchups in any NCAA tournament field is always dangerous.
And 1-8 matchups are bad. 1-8, 1-9. Yeah. There's really no good way to
always
do
because
it.
You can always get a team that's playing with house money, playing with momentum. You can always the one seed can fall the weight of the pressure of being the one seed. We've seen it with Virginia several years ago with being the one seed. We saw it last year with Arkansas, but they were banged up all year long. But then when they got healthy, they showed potentially how good a team they could be, and they were able to win that second round matchup. So yeah, sometimes being a one seed isn't always cracked up to be. When you think about there's a downside to it as well.
And we'll see what happens as we get into the bracket next week. But some interesting banter, especially on that one seed. Now, let's talk about conference tournament week, whether it be in Washington, D.C., Kansas City, New York, Minneapolis. Minneapolis for the Big Ten just seems so goddamn wrong. Las Vegas or Nashville. Conference tournament week is the last chance to impress the NCAA committee, to tell that committee to take their quad one and shove it, whether it be to move up in seed line or just to get some momentum back into the big dance. There are a lot of teams who need a bunch of wins this week, and a lot of teams that already don't have a lot of wins this week because they've already been eliminated before we even talk. We'll get to Kansas in just a second. But Anthony, let's start off with the Marquette Golden Eagles, currently playing now, currently down 1 to Villanova. They were the Big
Yeah.
East favorite in
Up
the
one.
Well, up one now. They just scored.
They're up 1. Okay, I have it on my phone on this side,
Yeah.
but doesn't really matter. They're in a close battle with Villanova right now. Marquette was the Big East favorite going into the season. 3 seed on some lines, 2 seed on the other lines. How can they kind of solidify getting a 2 seed going into Selection Sunday?
Well, you look at the marquee wins. First off, for the record, I would take Minneapolis in the Big Ten over Brooklyn for the ACC tournament any day of the week. Okay, that was being out of place.
Yes.
Okay, but getting back to the Marquette Golden Eagles, you got the marquee wins at Creighton, who lost, by the way, just before we went on the air. Kansas, at Illinois, Texas, and 2 victories over a Villanova team they're playing right now. Obviously, Villanova playing for their postseason lives in this game. There was losses to Butler, to the Butler Bulldogs. But the Golden Eagles are 23-8, 14-6. And net is net 13. But this is the 8 quad one wins for 8. But this is clearly not a healthy team. I mean, Tyler Kolek is out for this tournament. With an oblique injury.
Not completely out for this. Not ruled out
for
the
the
whole
Big East
entire
tournament
yet.
The
Not
Big
ruled
East
out for the
tournament,
entire. Still not ruled out for the entire tournament yet officially, but is definitely out on tonight's game at least.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an oblique injury, so I think we've all seen oblique injuries before. It's always touch and go
it
at
probably
most.
won't be. I'm just kind of establishing the fact that it's still kind of iffy in playing this week.
Yeah, Rabbi, but if you want to roll, if you want to juggle the magic 8 ball, it's gonna come up.
It's gonna come out most likely no, but again, official and non-official are the ways to do it. It's not out for the tournament until he's actually out for the tournament.
Yeah, but I think if you look at the views of Shaka Smart, you need him for the NCAA title run. I mean, and last year he had a thumb injury that kind of crippled Marquette's Final Four titles. With him, obviously they are a contender for Final Four. Without him, you're seeing it right now that they're struggling, even with Cam Jones and also Iguodala, who's back in the lineup after he missed a game with illness. They have a tough time with a desperate Villanova team. They're going to need to get healthy. I think that's the number one thing too. Is if they can hold on, they can pull this win out tonight. Maybe get to the finals of the tournament. I think that'll solidify them as a number 2. They don't want to fall further than number 3. I think that's the most important thing right now. For Marquette is just getting the guys back, getting 100%. Because I think Shaka Smart, the way he is coaching, he's coaching basically 2 prongs. He's coaching to try to win this tournament, the Big East, but he's also at the same time trying to get his guys 100% healthy because he knows there's a bigger prize at the end of the tunnel. So this is a 2-pronged thing. I mean, Kolek was the Big East player of the year a year ago. He's averaging 15 a game, 7 assists. That's a huge and obviously with the assists, that's a big deal because now when you watch, and we've seen Marquette tonight, it's been a lot of 2-man game with Jones and Iguodala, and that's clearly something that is going to run tiresome and become repetitive after a while. They need Kolek back in the lineup if they want to have a deep tournament run. But as far as making a good impression, I think if they can get to the Big East finals without Kolek, that would at least solidify them as a 2. But it's always guaranteed that they won't fall no further than a 3rd seed overall. Whatever bracket they're in. I think they were in the East bracket the last I checked. I haven't looked at Joe. Joe Dawes will update his bracketology seemingly like every hour on the hour. So I've lost track of where exactly who's who. I mean, look, St. John's 5 hours ago was last team out. They actually won the 4 buys as like a half hour ago. So much has been pushed and juggled around the last 45 minutes.
It's interesting. You talk about, the needing Kolek. I mean, we talk about how important guard play is this time of year, especially heading into the NCAA tournament. You talk back to, you go back to our college basketball preview. Marquette was one of my Final Four teams. They're probably the only one who potentially still has a chance based on everything else that's going on. But yeah, it's a question of how the selection committee is going to, weigh their performance if they go out tonight, versus, the team that they're likely to be when Kolek is healthy in time for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and Rabbi, I'll get back to you, but also, obviously, he hasn't been ruled out for the tournament entirely, but I've had an oblique injury before, and rest is really the only thing
I understand
that helps. And I can understand if Shaka Smart decides to play it safe and don't play him at any point this weekend, rather than to say, hey, look, we're still in the tournament. We're going to have a first-round matchup either next Thursday or Friday to buy him some extra time and get that oblique injury healthy. So that way, at least he's going in with a full roster and then not being handicapped as he was a year ago with an injury, not the same injury, but an injury nonetheless.
Yeah, it's going to be a very interesting time for Marquette. I do feel like even at full strength, they have underachieved this year a little bit. It is a tough Big East. I think a lot of times, a lot of teams fall in a conference that's going to be a 5 or 6 bid conference most likely. But we'll see. Marquette is a team that has some work to do, I think, in a lot of people's eyes to see if they'll go far in the tournament. And we'll see where they fall next week. By the way, currently in Lunardi's bracket, there are 2 in the Midwest. Purdue would be their number 1 team. So we'll see what happens. I currently surprised because I think the more of 3 or 4.
Quick question: what would be the first round matchups for the Midwest?
Their first round matchups would be in Indianapolis right now, and that's likely going to be their first round matchup spot because they're going to be a top 4 seed, and the favoring would be that as a Midwest team, that's probably where they would stay. Okay, Shay, Kansas. 3 top 5 team in America for most of the year, and then going into the Big 12 tournament, a 6 seed as a underdog to 11 seed in conference Cincinnati. How did this happen? They lost that game, by the way. And what are Kansas's chances like on Sunday to get into the bracket, and what spot?
Yeah, you talked about them, the 6th seed, that's the lowest they've ever been in the Big 12 tournament under Bill Self. And,
they never started on a Wednesday in the
never
Big 12
did not
tournament.
Have the double bye. Exactly. Yeah. They were projected as a 3 or 4 seed, depending on which bracketologist you asked. The resume overall as a whole, 22-9, 10-8 in the Big 12, which was the number 1 conference in the nation this year in terms of net. 12-1 non-conference. They were 15-1 at home. So, their ability to dominate at the Fog, continued this year. They were 3-7 on the road though, 4-1 in neutrals. Their net was 19, KPA 19, SOR was 10, BPI 19, KenPom 21. So all solid numbers there. Strength of schedule, their net was 1. Big 12 is as I said, is the number 1 ranked conference in net. South non-conference strength of schedule was 35. So they were 7-8 in quad 1, 3-1 non-conference, 6-0 in quad 2. One of those was non-conference, 4-1 in Q3, 3-0 outside the conference, 5-0 in Q4. All those were non-conference. Their best wins, they beat UConn at home. That's a quad 1 victory. They had a quad 1 win over Tennessee in a neutral court, quad 1 win over Kentucky in a neutral court. And, they had a dominant win over Houston in February at the Fog. Good losses this year. They lost to a really good Iowa State team on the road. That's a Q1 loss. They lost to a surprisingly good BYU team who has fared pretty well in their first season in the Big 12. BYU is the only team to come into Allen Fieldhouse this year and beat Kansas. They had a neutral court Q1 loss to Marquette and a road loss in Q1 to Texas Tech. Two bad losses. West Virginia, which is a Q3 road loss. West Virginia is 158 in the net. And, the Houston loss, in the season finale on the road. And the reason that's in there, and I'll get to it a little more in depth, was because that was about the absolute worst I have ever seen a Bill Self Kansas team play ever. To say that Houston exacted some revenge for that double-digit loss in February is saying something. I'll get into it in a minute. Ken Pom, adjusted efficiency rankings. Overall, number 18 at plus 20.61. Their adjusted offensive efficiency of 114.9 is number 46. Their 94.3 adjusted defensive efficiency is number 10. Now, just like with the previous segment, what I initially wrote, what's about to follow on Monday, right after the end of the regular season to set the stage for their conference tournament opener. So, here it is. That loss to Houston in the Big 12 regular season finale is a bad loss in terms of the Cougars just flat out running the Jayhawks out of the gym. I mean, it was a 30.76-46 loss. The game was over well before halftime. It was fugly. Hands down the worst conference loss for Kansas under Bill Self. I believe it's the first time he's been held to under 50 points in a game since he's been in Lawrence. The Cougars dominated at home pretty much the same way the Jayhawks dominated at the Phog when they beat Houston back in February, though, like I said earlier, much closer, 78-65. This is a Kansas team that has been trending in the wrong direction pretty much since conference play started. They started the season like a house on fire with one loss in their first 14 games, which included their first conference game. But they've gone 9-8 since, and recent history says that a Kansas team with a losing record on the road won't get out of the first weekend of the NCAA. So the last four times they entered the big dance with a losing road record, 2013-14, 2014-15, 2018-19, 2020-21, they bowed out in the second round. One of the major reasons for that is the health of their starting five, which on paper is as good as any in the nation. But that health hasn't been great and has put Bill Self in a very tough spot. To say he has a thin bench is like saying Robin Oppenheimer was a humble physicist. If you saw the Academy Award-winning movie, you get the joke. All-American candidate small forward Kevin McCullough Jr., the conference's leading scorer at 18.3 points per game, has been dealing with a knee problem for most of the year. He didn't play at all in the second half in the blowout loss to Houston. He aggravated the injury in the win over Kansas State on March 5 and has missed 6 games over the past 6 weeks because of a bone bruise in that same knee. He will miss the Big East. He was set up. He wasn't going to play in the Big 12 tournament, so he could rest up and be ready for the NCAAs. To add further insult to injury, pun intended, and an example of gallows humor, Kansas was also without center Hunter Dickinson, the conference's second leading scorer at 18 flat points per game, leading rebounder at 10.8 boards for the Big 12 tournament as he dislocated his shoulder with about 11 minutes remaining in the loss to Houston. Dickinson popped the shoulder back in, and the results of his MRI indicated that he did not tear his labrum, so he won't need surgery, and he should be able to resume practicing next week and will likely be ready for the NCAAs. But with neither of them being able to play for the Jayhawks in the Big 12 tournament, getting past their first round opponent, Cincinnati or West Virginia, was going to be a challenge. How did that fare? Glad you asked. Here's the conference update. 6-seeded Kansas, as Rabbi noted, was blown out 72-52 by 11-seeded Cincinnati Wednesday night. The Jayhawks offense had some spurts, but never seemed to find any consistent rhythm. Both ball and player movement were seriously lacking. Point guard DeJuan Harris struggled to make shots for himself on a night he needed to do so. He was 3 of 11 from the floor, as well as make plays for his teammates, only 5 assists against 4 turnovers. They could not hit from beyond the arc. Shooting guard Johnny Furphy's late season shooting struggles continued. He went 1 for 8 from the floor, 0 for 3 from 3, making him 3 for his last 19 over the last 5 games from beyond the arc. Kansas overall, 3 for 20 from downtown. But they allowed the Bearcats to let it rain from beyond the arc. 4 different players had at least 2 triples. Without Dickinson, they were beaten up on the boards 49-38, including giving up 16 offensive rebounds to the Bearcats. They lacked a presence both in the post on offense and any semblance of a rim protector on defense. Without McCullough, power forward KJ Adams was the entire offense. 22 points on 9 of 14 from the floor, 4 of 6 from the line. No other Jayhawk was in double figures in points. I know they were severely undermanned, but this was almost as bad as the loss to Houston last weekend. And it's not the impression, that's not the final impression you want to leave the selection committee with. The resume overall, as I said, is tournament worthy, but the team that we saw run roughshod over its non-conference schedule and the team we saw struggle in conference play are two very different teams. And while the selection committee may take the injuries to the Jayhawks' two best players as mitigating factors, in seeding Kansas, both should be able to play once the NCAAs get underway next week, as I said. But having watched them all season, seeing how they fell further and further down the top 25 as their Jekyll and Hyde performance in conference play continued, I was surprised that any bracketologists continue to project them as a 3 seed, which Brian Bennett at The Athletic, Mike DeCourcy at Fox, and Joe Lunardi at ESPN all did before Lunardi dropped them to the 4 line after the loss to Houston. The others followed after last night's loss, the Jayhawks 4th in their last 5 games. I thought they were a 4 seed at best, but I don't see how they don't drop to at least the 5 seed line come Selection Sunday. CJ Moore, a college basketball writer for The Athletic, put it pretty succinctly in his piece today, writing, when you look out there on Wednesday night, this wasn't the Goliath that is Kansas. This looked like a mid-major basketball team just trying to hang with a high major that is headed, meaning Kansas, that's headed to the NIT.
That's a little harsh considering, but I think that team has had no bench the entire year, and it kind of caught up to them. It's like you have the starting 5 is
Rabbi,
possibly the best starting 5 in the country.
Right, but it's also been a little more
it.
than just not having a bench and having holes there. Trust me, having watched this team all season, especially when they got into conference play, this is a team that outside of Allen Fieldhouse really struggled to get into their offense and knock down shots. They got some really good games for when McCullough was healthy. He was able to do things for them. When all 5 of those guys are playing well, when Furphy first got injected into the starting lineup, he came out hot on a tear, added that 5th Beatle, if you will, and they finally had an offense that was clicking. But the minute he stopped hitting shots from downtown. The minute they started being able to collapse on Dickinson because McCullough was out with injury, this team struggled. Bill Self, on a number of occasions, especially in the Houston game, you saw him on the sidelines. You didn't have to be a qualified lip reader to see his lips go, what are we doing? He had to say that. He said that way too often this season during conference play.
Sure he didn't throw in a 4-letter word every now and then to go along with what are we doing? I think he might have.
Rabbi, I lead the F-bomb dropping on this show to you, so.
Well, anyway, here's a good F-bomb. What the F is Kentucky doing? They're winning games, and that's something that's going to be looked at on Selection Sunday. Kentucky's been kind of a Jekyll and Hyde team this year. Their net has been as high as 16. They're pretty much at it now at 18, 17 Ken Palm. And the record of 23-8, where you're 7-3 away from Rupp Arena, is pretty good considering
that conference. Yeah,
it's because that conference is going to be probably your 6 or 7 bid conference. Only the Big 12 has been projected to have more bids in this tournament. Currently, a lot of people have them at 9. Kentucky, a very Jekyll and Hyde season when you read the resume. They did lose to Kansas early in the year, and then they picked up a lot of different quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, and quad 4 victories, and had a stretch where they won from November 17th to January 9th. They only lost once. That once, however, was at home to UNC Wilmington. Bam, that's a quad 3 loss. And there's just been like little pieces when you look at the resume. They lost at home to Gonzaga this year. They've lost at home to Tennessee. They've lost at home to Florida. And they lost at LSU. There's a quad 2 loss in there. The Florida loss that I mentioned is also qualified as a quad 2 loss. But the way this team has finished as the season has gone on, they've won 7 out of their last 8, have wins at Auburn, home to Alabama, at Mississippi State, and at Tennessee. As you and I have talked about, Jay, this is a team that can easily score 100 points or score 90 points and let up 90 points at the same exact time. But when it comes to the new style of offense in college basketball, you're going to score 90 points a lot of the time. This team has 4 players who had honors this year in some way, shape, or form. The obvious one is Antonio Reeves, who is also one of the Final 5 candidates for the Jerry West Award this year. He was on the Naismith Trophy midseason list, 20.2 points per game this year. That is the highest scoring average per game by any player that John Calipari has ever had.
Wow.
Shoots 50% from the field, 44% from three-point range, all career best. He's the only Power 5 player this year in the country who has 1.5 made three-pointers per game, averages 49% of the field, 44% from three-point range, and 86% from the charity stripe. He does everything. He's had 30-point games this year against Louisville. He has multiple 30-point games this year. Only 4 players in the Calipari era have ever done that. He's top double figure scoring in all but 1 game this season, and 19 times will give you 20 points per game, hands down. Now, Kentucky's also had their other players really step up, especially in this run. Rob Dillingham, who was the freshman of the year. I know, freshman of the year in Kentucky for SEC. Come on. 15 points per game off the bench for Rob Dillingham. The most off the bench among all players in the SEC, and the most by any true freshman off the bench this season in the SEC. And he had a career-high 35 points in a loss to Tennessee in February. That's the most points that you've ever seen off of the bench by a player in the Calipari era. He is on the all-rookie team, and in Kentucky's 7 games against ranked opponents this season, 17 points a game, 60% shot making from three-point range. You also have Reed Shepherd, who was the second team all SEC player, 75 steals, 140 assists. He also has a great three-point average of 52.6% and a true shooting percentage of 4th in the SEC of 70.4%. He also scored a 30-point game in UK's come behind win on February 27th against Mississippi State.
Not bad for a legacy kid.
He is a legacy kid. He is a pain in the ass at 6'3", mind you. And then you also, by the way, have Camden, New Jersey's DJ Wagner. 2.1 assist to turnover ratio. That's good, I hear, for a college player. And he had not a single turnover against Kansas. Again, a loss, but again, not a single turnover. Not the best defensive team, as we have already established in this whole conversation. I know we have to get to that portion of it.
Right. You know, it's funny. It's like, Anthony, when Rabbi and I were putting the show together and we were talking about Kentucky, I said the thing with them is how far they go, both in their own conference tournament as well as the NCAA, will depend on whether they can be, to use one of Rabbi's favorite phrases, if they can be at the very least serviceable on defense. So while you were talking about this, Rabbi, I'm going to because I went back and checked Ken Pomeroy's adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency numbers for Kentucky. They are number 6 in the nation in offensive efficiency, 123 flat. They are number 97 in the nation.
Yikes.
Defensive efficiency at 102.2. Take it from there, Rabbi.
Yeah, no. As I mentioned before, also in this same chat, we're just revealing things here. 15 games this year, they've either scored 90 points, led up 90 points, or done both of those things, which has happened on 4 occasions. So let's talk about
they're basically the Milwaukee Bucks of college basketball. They have to outscore their own defense.
They do have to outscore their own defense, but they can't fire John Calipari. No reason to fire John Calipari.
Lifetime contract, basically.
Deservedly so. He's one of the best coaches in college basketball history.
Love him or hate him, the man does not coach.
But to finish off the point on the brackets, that resume, especially how they've played this year, they're going to be the 2 seed in the SEC tournament. They draw Texas A&M tomorrow, a team that needs the win probably as much for their tournament life as Kentucky needs for their tournament stock to go up. A lot of places have them as a 3 seed. They're currently a 3 seed right now in Lenardi's bracket. There were places that had them as a 4 before the Tennessee game. Now 3 is their kind of likely landing spot. I think you get a conference tournament victory, or a conference tournament title where you beat Tennessee again on that Sunday. But as I said before, Tennessee, you beat any of these teams. There's no bad wins in any of in this club. You have a lot of chances to just have banger win after banger win after banger win, and that could get them into the 2 line. Where I'm going to tell you right now, no number 1 seed wants to see that offense come to town or come to whatever town that they're in when we get to the NCAA tournament. This is a Final Four worthy roster. May not be a Final Four worthy defense, but all you got to do is put it. But all you got to do is put it together for 4 games and get yourself to the tourney. And I think out of that, Kentucky has to get yourself to the Final Four. And I think Kentucky has a very good chance of having that happen. But the first thing they need to do is improve their seeding, which I think they can.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how many of these teams, we're going to be talking about once the brackets come out when we do our March Madness preview next week. Because some of these teams where they sit is going to make those regions very interesting.
We'll talk about that, but now let's talk about the bubble. As I say before, this is not where you want to be at this time of year, but these teams have a shot to hear their name called this Selection Sunday, whether it be in Dayton or at a place not Dayton. And I think we all know where we want to be, a place not Dayton. But now we go to the teams that want to say, thank you for that quad 1 win distinction committee. We love you, suck-ups. Anthony, start us off with a team whose fate isn't up to them anymore. The team from Indiana State. Let's talk about the Sycamores, Anthony.
Yeah, by the way, quick question. What does the Sycamores and myself have in common?
Oh, no.
Yeah, we both been sitting around watching college basketball this entire week.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Good point.
Inactive.
They actually just sit on their couches just being like, is it Sunday yet? Is it Sunday yet? And they just have a countdown clock going on the corner.
I think that's dreaded Sunday, pretty much. They're looking forward to it, but that's besides the point. Well, like the Sycamores, they're 28-6, they 17-3 in the conference, and they had destiny in control of their own hands. But our 4-point upset loss, I don't even call it an upset loss to Drake, but a loss nonetheless to Drake in the Missouri Valley Conference Championship game, pretty much has to now bite their nails as much as I do these days, and pretty much bubble watching. They have to sit around and wait and watch and hope the chips fall in their May. Look at their resume. They have a net of 29, so that is something that works in their favor. The highest net rating to be left out of the tournament was NC State when they had a net of 33 back in 2019. So there was precedent for that too. However, there are 2 things that is working in their favor. 3 things actually that are not in their favor. Number one, the Missouri Valley Conference is a conference that traditionally yielded just one team that's always gone to the team that has won the conference tournament. You have to go back to 2021 when the last time they actually had 2 teams, Loyola and Chicago, who lost in the 18th tournament, by the way, earlier this afternoon. You won't see Sister Jean this year, unfortunately. But Drake was the second team that got in 2021 and won that first game against Wichita State on an upset. So that is one thing that's working against them. A second thing is that KenPom. It is at, let's see if I mean this correctly, 304 non-conference strength of schedule.
That's not what you want.
And 125th strength of schedule rating. So that's number 2. Number 3, they have 1 quad win. 1. And that was at Bradley. So I don't think those are 3 things that are definitely not working in their favor. Going into Selection Sunday. If there is one thing that is working for them, is the fact that they have the 28 wins, and they have the net that's working for them. And look, when you look at the team overall, they are 11th offensively in the nation on scoring. They're led by Robbie Avier, who averages 17.5 a game. Scored 35 a couple of weeks ago. actually a couple of games ago, he had 21 against Northern Iowa. So obviously the offense runs through them. But again, this is a team that, according to Joe Ladani, they would be one of the last teams in. They would actually be the last team in. According to his bracket, we don't know if that changes.
And that's probably
Tomorrow.
gonna change. I'll talk about
It,
that
it
in a
pretty much
second
will
for
change because
this.
there was a couple upsets earlier today, and we were talking right about now talking about the bubble expanding for a few teams as well. It may go well for Indiana State State as well. And another thing too is historically we've seen the selection committee reward mediocrity in the power conferences over excellence in a mid-major. So it's the history too that's behind this that Indiana State are going to be kicking themselves if they are on the outside looking in come Selection Sunday, and knowing that they had an opportunity to really wrap up an automatic bid rather than having to sit around for the next several days hoping for teams around them to just kind of fall and falter, so that way they that improves their chances of getting in.
This was a
Yeah.
nationally ranked team, by the way, earlier this year, Jay. So this team
Yeah.
has had some big highs going in.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunate because for when they cracked the top 25, it was such a great story. I mean, overall, they're a great story. I mean, they're kind of what the epitome of college basketball is, and for the younger generation, y'all are asking what's the big deal about Indiana State. I mean, they haven't been in the national conversation since 1979. What happened back then? Larry Bird led Indiana State to the national title game against Magic Johnson and Michigan State. That's really the last time we ever heard from them. So to kind of have them back in the national conversation for a little while was such a great story. And I'll give you a little bit of a teaser. I'm going to kind of bring that up when we in our closing segment. I'm going to leave it at that. Stick around.
Well,
yeah, last
let's
postseason
get to it
appearance, by
quickly
the
so we
way.
can actually get to that.
Yeah, by the way, the last season tournament appearance was 2011, so it's been quite a while that they've been able to get to the big dance.
And the A10, by the way, where Dayton was the projected team, they lost tonight. A10, by the way, every high seed won today.
Yes.
So it's 8
Brooklyn-
versus 5 and 7 versus 6 in
Brooklyn
the
has been
conference semifinals.
Let me tell you, I went to day one of the A10 tournament, and it was back-to-back game, one possession games. The first game actually went to overtime. I mean, Brooklyn has been like a graveyard for would-be NCAA tournament hosts, because today I just glanced at some of the A10, and obviously the game we were watching, St. Bonaventure and
St. Bonaventure
Chicago
and Loyola, the 2 seed. That was a great game
to
itself
overtime.
too.
That was a great game in itself.
All of their games have pretty much been one possession games, and I always said to Anthony, this is a league that always, with all of these other conferences going in, the A10 can have only the automatic bid, can be a 1-bid league, but for some reason, I end up watching their tournament more than any other tournament.
And what I say,
understand
what I
why.
say, and what I say, after day 2, it really gets interesting.
Even day 2 was interesting. It's just shocking and how, but again, we'll talk about that in a second. That's why we love the madness. Now, we talked about a team. By the way, Indiana State came out of that game cold, and they kind of had to work from behind almost the entire game, which, again, not a great look. Good way to end it, though. But let's just say Colorado State, just like Seinfeld, hates to drink. Jay, we talked about a team that kind of ended on a bad note. Whatever St. John's does right now, they're going to probably end on a good note and making the committee look a little harder in Queens.
Yeah, I mean, my alma mater was on the last 4 line, per most bracketologists coming into the Big East tournament, where they're the number 5 seed. You look at the record, 19-12, 11-9 in the Big East, 8-3 non-conference. They were 12-4 at home, split between Carneseca Arena, UBS Arena, and the Garden. 3 home venues this year for the Johnnies. Can we please not play out on the island ever again? No disrespect, Rabbi, but I mean that place just doesn't feel like home when you're a St. John's guy. They were
It's a neutral site. Get out of the way.
No, those were considered home games.
That's so stupid. But
I
here we go.
agree.
It's still a neutral site to me.
Let's not do that again. They were 5-6 on the road. They were 2-2 in neutral court. The metrics: their net was 39, solid. KPI was 70, strength of records 47, BPI 30, Ken Palm 31. Their SOS, strength of schedule, net was 34, non-conference 183. Quad one, they were 3-9, 0-1 in the non-conference, 6-2 in quad two, 2-1 outside the Big East, 3-1 in Q3, 2-1 outside the Big East, 7-0 in Q4, 4-0 outside the Big East. Best win, Creighton, which was their signature win coming in that season-ending 5-game winning streak at home, and they beat Villanova on the road. They're good losses, if you will. They lost to UConn on the road. That's a Q1 loss. They lost to Creighton at Creighton, another Q1 road loss. Lost to Marquette in a tough one at home, Q1 loss, and they lost to the aforementioned Dayton Flyers. That's a Q1 loss on a neutral court. Bad losses, two of them stand out. They lost to Michigan. That's a Q3 home loss, guys. Michigan's net 132. They had a Q2 neutral site loss to BC. The Eagles are net 96. Ken Palm's adjusted efficiency margins, they're 31 overall, plus 17.69. Their adjusted offensive efficiency of 116.9 is number 30. Their adjusted defensive efficiency of 99.2 is number 41. And just like with the two previous segments, what I'm about to read you was written Monday at the end of the regular season as a setup for their conference tournament opener. The Johnnies' 19 wins are the most by a St. John's team since the 2018-2019 season, which coincidentally was the last time my alma mater made the NCAA tournament. They come into the Big East tournament riding a 5-game winning streak since head coach Rick Pitino threw the team under the Q46 bus. For those who aren't students or alumni, that's the bus that runs by the Jamaica Estates campus. After their 68-62 loss to Seton Hall, who took both games from the Johnnies this season. They coughed up a 12-point halftime lead in that regular season loss to the Pirates and were outscored by 18 in the second half. It was their third straight loss, the second 3-game losing streak, and a 2-8 stretch that saw them fall to 6-9 after a 4-1 start in conference play. In that season-ending 5-game winning streak, St. John's averaged 88.4 points per game. That includes a 104-point outing at DePaul and only allowed 73 points per game. That's a 15.4-point margin of victory. They shot 53% from the floor, 40.7% from three on 17 attempts per game, 75.8 from the stripe at a little over 18 attempts per game. They averaged 19 assists per game on their 33.8 field goals per game in this winning streak. That's a 56% assist rate. They only committed 7.6 turnovers per game. They cranked up their defense as well, averaging 8 steals and 7 blocks per game in this winning streak. Granted, 3 of the 5 wins were against Georgetown twice and DePaul, the bottom of the Big East, but it also included that win over Creighton, the second best team in the conference, by 14 points at home and a 23-point win over Butler on the road. Number 5, St. John's play number 4, Seton Hall. Like I said, I wrote this early on the Thursday in the third meeting of the year for the two local area schools. And in my opinion, for all intents and purposes, and I have said this in multiple group chats out, the one that the three of us have, as well as the one with the rest of the OG on the Sports Lines gang. I said, for all intents and purposes, this is a last 4 in playing game, as I don't see the winner getting past UConn in the big semis, in the Big East semis, unless the Huskies just mail it in as their number 1 seed in the big dance is already secured. Rabbi, I know I jinxed you the first time I said it. We'll see how it goes. ESPN's John Gassaway believed as of Monday that both the Johnnies and the Pirates were relatively safe. Both are squarely on the bubble and projected as double-digit seeds. So anything can happen based on how other teams in the last 4 buys, last 4 in, last 4 out conversation fare this week. So did the old adage of it's pretty hard to beat a conference opponent 3 times in this season, in a season hold? I'm glad you asked. Here's the conference tournament update. The St. John's team that we saw during the season-ending 5-game winning streak showed up at MSG this afternoon and outscored the Pirates by 14 in the second half, turning a 5-point 45-40 halftime lead into a 19-point 91-72 victory. St. John's bench had 20 of the 45 first half points, led by 10 from R.J. Lewis. He had on 5 of 7 with 7 boards. They finished with 37 for the game. Lewis finished with a team-leading 18 points on 5 of 11 from the floor, 0 for 2 from 3, and 8 of 8 from the stripe. He had 9 rebounds. Naheem Aline, the UConn transfer, added 14 on 5 of 5, 3 of 3, and 1 of 2. Rick Pitino has gone 10 deep practically all season, and the second unit once again produced. Seton Hall, 0 bench points at the half. They finished with 7. Dennis Jenkins, St. John's point guard, and the guy who traveled with Pitino from Iona, just 11 points on 5 of 10 shooting from the floor, 1 of 4 from 3, and surprisingly 0 free throw attempts and just 4 assists. They'll need him to be bigger if they get into the dance. Jordan Dingle, 6 points on 3 of 6, but 0 of 3 from the floor. 0 of 3 from downtown at the first and the half. He finished with 14 points on 6 of 13 overall, 2 of 7 from deep. And again, no free throws. His offense had been on a decent uptick down the stretch, and they'll need him that to continue. He's really got to be closer to the 20-point scorer he was at Penn the previous 2 seasons. Jose Soriano, solid 14-point, 12 rebound, double-double, going 5 for 7 from the floor. But more importantly, hit all 4 of his free throws. The St. John's first half shooting, they were 18 of 30. That's 60%. They were only 3 of 10 beyond the arc, 6 of 6 from the line. They tailed off from the floor in the second half, just 14 of 32. They finished 32 of 62. That's a little under 52%. They wound up 5 of 13 from beyond the arc. That's 38.5%, which offset the drop from everywhere else on the floor. They finished 8 of 23, 34.8. They feasted at the line, going 13 of 14 in the second half to finish 19 of 20, 95%. Seton Hall, 14 of 29 from the floor, 48.3, 7 of 13 from beyond the arc, 53.8, 5 of 7 at the line, 71% in the first half. That's how they kept things close. The St. John's defense showed up in the second half. They held the Hall to 11 of 28 from the floor. That's less than 40%. 1 of 9 from 3. That's 11%, though they did let them go 9 of 12, 75% from the line. St. John's dominated points in the paint, 42-26, owned the glass, 38-28, fast break points, 19-13. They had 22 points off 14 Seton Hall turnovers. They added 10 steals and 5 blocks. As Rabbi, as you said to me when we talked right after the game, you said that was as impressive a performance as you've seen from my alma mater this year, and I can't argue the fact with you. Justin Williams of The Athletic wrote in his Monday Bubble Watch piece that the winner of this game likely becomes a projected in team as the bracketology vernacular goes, while the loser will be holding its breath on Selection Sunday. I'm more aligned with that scenario than Gasaway's, who still thinks both are safe. St. John's needed to win and win emphatically. And in doing so, I think they take Seton Hall's spot as the last team on the last 4 buys list. Again, AKA the projected in scenario. And the Hall, if they're lucky, will only fall down to the last 4 in line.
There's 2 different schools of thought with this team. 10-2, by the way, from November 19th to January 10th. And one of those losses included a UConn game, which right before Christmas, where it was back and forth. Either team could have won, and they only lost by 4. And then from January 13th to February 18th, 2-8, including a UConn game where they lost at home by 13. And obviously, the last game of that was the Seton Hall game, which led to Rick Pitino's rant, which, by the way, if we mentioned it, was a game that was played at UBS Arena as a home game for St. John's. So that's what turned out to be. It's been a very weird year for St. John's. I think they've gone through about as many ups and downs as expected, and I think a lot of people expected this to probably be the point borderline tournament team, possibly in, possibly out, just because of the fact that Pitino did bring in a lot of talent on this team that just hadn't meshed. And it was just more of a roller coaster to get to this point.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a lot in tomorrow's Big East game. You're going to see a lot in this Big East game tomorrow against UConn to see where this St. John's team is, because I do think there's always been situations where the committee can do something kind of off of the wall. And I don't think they're going to be out, honestly, if I had to put my life on it. But I can see portions of it where it could be a problem. But again, I'm not a bracketologist. I only play 1-on-2.
There you go. You know, I mean, the 19-12 overall record and 11-9 in the Big East is pretty much where I thought they would be. Would put them squarely in the middle of the conference. I just didn't expect them to get there by going like this.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, and I remember I was at the garden yesterday. I texted both of you, and
Yep.
thankfully Jay clarified what I was trying to say. I think the way the Big East tournament broke down, and the fact that Seton Hall and St. John's didn't have to play on
Avoided
day
the dreaded
one
Wednesday game. Yep.
helped
And St. John's not
both.
having to play on day
Yeah,
one really helped out a lot
yeah.
because we
I
saw
think
what
it
almost
helped
happened
both.
with Villanova in that situation, almost losing to a 3-win total
Yeah,
DePaul team on day one.
yeah. I said that it helped both teams out because I felt like the loser was really playing. I felt like the game was really the avoid Dayton, Ohio at all costs game.
Yeah.
Whereas the winner would be kind of the honor, like the almost guaranteed team to get into the field, where the loser will probably drop down into that one of those 4 playing games next Tuesday and
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Either
And,
one of the
and
11,
yeah,
playing
one
games.
of the 11 seed games. And St. John's in the second half, I thought that was one of the most complete performances they played this season by far. And yeah, you said it. Pitino brought in a lot of talent. It took a while to mesh together. We've seen this before with new talent and just not having time to gel together until maybe towards the end and picking the high gear. I do think the game against UConn tomorrow is going to be a measuring stick of where this team is going into the tournament. If they play UConn tough, they're playing well, even a loss, I think that would be a step in the right direction and a building block going into next week. But also the selection committee, it may look like, hey, look, this is a team that could scale a team with a top team or two if they get in and get an opportunity. So it's a lot at stake for St. John's. I think they still have a little work to do as far as the smelling test is concerned. But as far as getting into the tournament, I think this win definitely locks them in as a tournament where Seton Hall drops down into a play-in. But yeah, the Big East bracket helped both teams out in a big way. But you felt like St. John's needed this game a little more to really kind of
I
get
think they
themselves
needed
into a
it both the
comfortable
same,
position
honestly.
to get into the
I
NCAA
know a
tournament.
lot of brackets had Seton Hall already in, but I just don't like the way that they've played overall, and I hope, at least for the sake of the committee, sees how Seton Hall has played down the stretch. Ironically enough, since the St. John's game, it's almost like they've traded spaces, but it's amazing how many
trending in the opposite directions.
It's amazing how many people gave Rick Pitino a lot of crap for that rant that he had, and I still don't like it myself, but it's worked.
No,
it's worked.
We were off that week, Rabbi, so we didn't really get a chance to talk about it on the show. But you and I talked about it, and I think one of the things I said to you is it's one thing to
Self-serving.
Put your team a new one within the confines of the the facility of the locker room and lay into them for what you perceive to be their things that they're lacking in. Just to me, in this day and age, you do not call players out in public. You don't trash them in public. You definitely don't call them out by name in public.
Self-serving.
Especially to the New York media. And literally, like I said in my piece, he threw them under the Q46 bus. Now, he did try and walk some of that rant back afterwards. He apologized for taking it a little too far. But, as one of the columnists on The Athletic wrote, he basically said it was a very classless thing to do. And I understand, and Rabbi, you said to me, it's not the first time Pitino has kind of, pulled something like this, and he's been known to lose his mind if his team is playing particularly badly. He's done it at previous stops. I just think there's a way to do it where you don't have to literally do that to your players like that. Not in this day and age.
Yeah. I would say I'll quote a movie. It's on the tip of my top called Blink at the moment, but the long story short is you want to build your players up that tear them down. And look, St. John played well, but that red could have had a really bad opposite effect on
Could have gone
young players.
very badly the other way.
It could have really gone the other way. If for say for Ripatino's saying, definitely it did not. It may have inspired him, but as a coach and obviously as leader in the locker room, it's never a good sign to never mind call out to throw players on the bus and to do it publicly. It's one thing behind closed doors, but publicly to do especially in a college setting, it's definitely not a good look. And
No,
yeah, I said St. John's,
absolutely
it could
not.
have definitely been a disastrous result.
Well, in the words of Rick Pitino, Deion Sanders ain't walking through the door at the end of this segment. I'm talking about the Colorado basketball edition of the Buffaloes. And like all of my other teams, you want a conference tournament update? Glad you asked. They haven't played yet. They played tonight against 6 seed Utah in the Pac-12 tournament's last game. They play about 30 minutes real time from when I'm talking right now. So the Pac-12 has been really a two-team conference all year. We talked about Arizona earlier, and Washington State built a resume where they got some big wins, including beating Arizona at Arizona to get themselves firmly into the bracket. Everybody else, throw them up in the air and see where it lands. The highest landing spot of that would be Colorado. Their record's not terrible. 26 net. It's the highest it's been all year. They've been there for a few days. 27 in Ken Palm. Strength of schedule, that net strength of schedule is 85, but the record is good. It's 22-9, and it is 16-1 at home, but a kind of miserable 4-7 away. Now, kind of like we talked about, we didn't really mention with St. John's earlier, they're not a team that schedules well in their non-conference, and you can see it here. There are games like Grambling State, Towson, Iona without Rick Pitino, Pepperdine, Miami of Florida would have been a good thing earlier in the year. Now that's a Q3 win. In fact, they didn't play a Q1 game outside of one game. They only played Q2 and Q3 and Q4 until January 4th when they played at Arizona and promptly lost that game by 47. Colorado is a team that has been up and down all year, but they are the third best team. Yes, admittedly in a weak conference, but in this type of resume, in a 68 team field, I don't know why NCAA you would ever expand this ever again to include more mediocre teams. But Colorado does have their case. They've won. They've had wins this year. They do have a quad 2 win against Washington State. Their quad 1 record, by the way, is 2-5. That's not good. And then their only 2 quad 1 wins are at Washington and at Oregon. They are 2 big road victories too, and that's something that the committee really looks this time of year. 6 straight wins going into the conference tournament, including a win against Utah by 24, who they'll play again tonight. The losses, they're not terrible in the Pac-12 season, but at Arizona State, at Cal, at UCLA. The only loss that they had at home was, again, Arizona, and it was by 20. But you're looking at a team that does have a decent resume outside of playing Utah Tech and Northern Colorado, teams that I don't think you even knew existed until I mentioned them to you in their non-conference season.
Unless you're a nerd like us.
I don't even know if I knew that first team existed. I knew about Northern Colorado. So they have some awards. They usually have been pretty good with awards in their history. KJ Simpson is the best player on their team. That is their first teamer. 19.6 points, 4.9 assists, 1.7 steals a game. He's also third in the league in overall rebounding. Has an assist to turnover ratio of 2.3 and is one of the best scoring players in this conference and hits 45% from three. So he is a player that is a junior, could easily be a good senior on this team. And you also have Tristan De Silva, a transfer from Munich, Germany, who is second on the team in scoring, field goals made, and pretty much good in every rebounding category too. Fourth in rebounding overall, 14th in defensive rebounding. Colorado is going to be a little bit tougher. They're going to need to win this game against Utah tonight, and then they're going to need to at least be able to play. Be very, very interesting going forward. I'm very interested to see if the Pac-12 can at least in their final season, they're not going out the way that they did in football, that is for sure. At least get themselves a third or even fourth team. Let's see if Oregon can make a run. That's the team that's over there into the tournament. But overall, that's the team I'm looking for. Colorado, a little bit of a different flavor from the East Coast and Midwest bias that we've had in the first two picks. And who knows? That's a team that you don't look at a lot. But the way that they've been playing over the last month, they could get a win or two in the tourney, but they have to get into the tourney first. And I'm thinking no matter what happens, unless they win the conference, they're going to end up playing in Dayton, Ohio. All right, let's move on
By the
to.
way,
Go ahead.
Grid-Eye Gang is the movie I was thinking about earlier with Dwayne Johnson as the coach. And he basically said, after a bad loss, I didn't just let my players down. I tore them down after he basically chastised them in front of and playing through in front of all the school officials after their first loss. So that was the movie I was thinking about with Rick Pitino. It's like, yeah, you can't, your players can let you down, but you can't tear them down at the same time by doing what he did and publicly criticizing them.
One of many wonderful rock movies on his IMDb resume. He is a tour de force. All right. 3,771. What does that number mean to you? Well, it should mean something because it's the new standard currently for points in either gender of college basketball. Move over, Pistol Pete. Don't care about your legacy anymore. Get out. Caitlin Clark is the one that owns the number that we've mentioned and owns it proudly. Add to that a third straight Big Ten postseason title. Probable number one seed when the bracket for that will get announced this Sunday. And oh yeah, some of the fullest arenas that you've ever seen in anything of college basketball when the Clark Road Show comes to town. Anthony, I can see you right here. So let's put this record-breaking season into perspective.
Well, I would tell you like this. I think I sent you guys a picture of Caitlin Clark advertisement outside of Penn Station. It was basically one of her signatures, a long-range three-pointer, where she set the all-time women's record. By the way, she's been must-see TV. I think that's one of the major things that stands out. The game where she played, when they played Ohio State on my Stern, where she passed Pistol Pete for the all-time scoring record. It was watched by 3.4 million viewers on national television. Compare that to the NBA game that was shown that afternoon between Boston and Golden State, which only drew 3 million viewers. And according to Michael Mullenville, who is president of Insight and Analytics at Fox Sports, women's college basketball games on the network are averaging a larger audience than the men's games. And women's ratings are 60% across all national networks. Date back to last year, Iowa and LSU national championship game on for the first time that was broadcast on ABC rather than the usual Saturday night ESPN bracket. The ESPN window, 9.9 million viewers, which is an all-time record. What Caitlin Clark is looked at now is she's looked at as a basketball ambassador. I mean, you see her in State Farm commercials now. You see her in obviously at billboards, advertisements everywhere. She's averaging 31 points a game, which is actually the nation high, 8.9 assists. She has 6 triple doubles, which is actually more than anyone else on the men's Division I side. But then you look at it like this, from a bigger perspective, women hoops has just been the more compelling storylines. And Rabbi and I talked about this all the time. We go back and forth during some of these women's college basketball games. You think about last weekend with LSU and South Carolina, and unfortunately, the situation that happened in the game got most of the headlines. But they played a game earlier this year that was a closely, highly contested game. You think about the UConn Huskies and Paige Beckers leading that team back to the tournament, and UNC and Juju Watkins and Cameron Brick, who is also going to be part of the NBA draft, and Lee Stanford. The women's game, I think, is definitely gotten a lot of attention, and for all the correct reasons. Caitlin Clark being a big part of that, and the national spotlight she has garnered. Of course, her game is backed everything up, but as a whole, I think just for women's college hoops entirely, it's been a better year all around, and it's definitely um garnered as much attention as the men's side, and it's definitely going to garner a lot of attention during the tournament. Also, I mean, and Caitlin Clark has made Iowa a must-see watch. But also when you look at it from a basketball perspective, the national title host rests and dies with her also, because not just her scoring, but her ability to create offense for everyone else. We watched that championship game on Sunday. Had a miserable first half and came alive in the second half, and leading that come behind a win over in that game. So I'm looking forward. What Caitlin Clark has done is she has brought basketball fans to the table, not just the women, but men as well. I think that's the biggest thing too, is that what we had basketball fans in general has been kind of glued in, every time she takes the court, every time she's gone and shot a 25-footer that most people would look at like, are you nuts? But for her, that's a regular shot. And by the way, if you want to add to Caitlin Clark's interest, have you seen the home opening ticket prices for the New York Liberty on May 18th? The Indiana Fever, who have the number one pick in the WNBA draft, obviously you're nuts if you don't think they're going to get Caitlin Clark with the number one pick.
That's a foregone.
Yeah, it's a foregone conclusion. The tickets were $67 for the home opener. It's now the cheapest tickets was nosebleeds at Barclays Center is $200 at least.
Right.
And so, just that first game, and you realize that Sabrina Ionescu is going to be on the other side of that. So I'm just kind of like this is the funnest part of that game is going to see which one can make the most shots from half court. Because both players shoot at least two or three Steph Curry like 3-pointers from like the parking lot whole game. So that I'm looking forward to that game more than any day. Too bad I don't have a ticket for that one. It's the next game, or maybe 20 if I'm going to, unfortunately. But that is a game I'm going to be tuned into whatsoever. But yeah, women's college hoops is definitely in a big spot. And I'm definitely looking forward to the men's and the women's national tournament.
It was probably the first time in a long time, and I think when you look at women's basketball throughout the years, it's really been, at least going in to the 2010s, it was a UConn Tennessee sport. It was Gina Wuriemma, Pat Summitt, Gina Wuriemma, Pat Summitt, and Gina was always the most, I wouldn't say, I would say brash personality in all of
It's a nice way of saying it.
women's college basketball, and probably the most notable name in women's college basketball, coach or player, whether you like it or not. Now that's different, considering just even before we talk about Caitlin Clark, all of the dynamic women's college basketball players who have gone on to the NBA that we've seen going throughout the years. Kelsey Plum, who was the initial person who set the all-time scoring record. Both the Agubuke sisters. That's something that you've seen before. Sabrina Ionescu, when she was at Oregon, taking that team to new heights. Remember when she missed the entire tournament in 2020? Everybody was like, I wanted to see what she could do. And forgot to see that. But you just see that. Aaliyah Boston in South Carolina, Angel Reese in LSU. These are players that are really just breaking the norm of not just being women's college basketball stars, but being just stars. And that's something
by the way,
completely different
Hannah
to see.
Hidalgo in Notre Dame also. That's another one.
Yes, absolutely. But just that. But Caitlin Clark brings it to a whole nother level. As I said before, it's a traveling roadshow. She's sold out arenas this year. She's putting tickets up into basically Super Bowl prices when you get over to that. And some of the records that she's just done this year is insane. Iowa's all-time scoring leader in November. First ever Division I player to record 3,000 points, 900 assists, and 800 rebounds a year. Big Ten all-time assist leader, did that in the end of the year of 2023. She has 1,000 career assists. Obviously, the women's all-time scoring record broke on February 15th. The women's college basketball scoring record itself, which is different from the Division I scoring record, did that on February 28th. She's had 17 triple doubles in her career. Sabrina Ionescu, by the way, has the most. She has 26. And obviously, she passed Pete Maravich for the most points all time, whether men or women, and did that in the regular season finale against Ohio State. I can't wait to see the NCAA women's tournament this year. And it's not, I mean, obviously, yay for women's sports, but honestly, to see how Caitlin Clark ends her career, I don't think there's going to be a person out there who's not an alma mater of any of the other places that's not going to be rooting for Caitlin Clark in this entire tournament. This is Steph Curry in women's sports if Steph Curry had gone to a major school and not Davidson, because this is something that we barely see in college basketball history. And I would not be surprised. I love the men's tournament as much as anybody else. I think we're going to see points for the women's tournament get much higher ratings this year than the men's tournament, just because of the parity in women's college basketball and the star power of women's college basketball. Yes, we hated to see that Tennessee-South Carolina fight, but a lot of people was like, holy crap, there's a fight happening in women's college basketball, and what if these two teams played at the tournament again? Not to mention the fact, I'm sorry, this was the LSU South Carolina fight. I don't know if I had said Tennessee South Carolina. Not to mention the day before, there was a game winner by Camila Cardoso of South Carolina that got themselves into the championship game. And oh yeah, South Carolina with 5 new starters this year is undefeated for the second straight year. Put some respect on Dawn Staley's name. But watch this women's tournament just as much as you see the men's. Watch the women's bracket just as much as you see the men's. Because what you're going to see this March on both genders is not going to make you think you're watching 2 different tournaments. And I felt that way for many, many years just because of a lot of things. Jay, take it home on this segment.
Yeah, you guys talked about Paige Bueckers, and how great is it for the sport for Paige Buckets to be back and healthy. And I mean, she basically carried a severely undermanned UConn women's basketball team to the Big East championship, this past weekend. 27 points in both games, literally barely got off the floor. It's really great to see her back and playing at the level, where we kind of expect from her. All right. As far as Caitlin Clark goes, I'm going to give y'all some stats because, that's my thing. I'm also going to give y'all a little bit of history lesson along the way. So strap in. Here we go. I'm going to start with her junior season. Led Iowa in scoring, 27.8 per game, number 1 in the nation, 7.1 boards, 8.6 assists. That was also number 1 in the nation last year. She had 5 double-doubles, 9 games with 10-plus rebounds, 13 games with 10-plus assists. She put up 24 points per game, 7 boards, and 10 flat assists in leading Iowa to a second straight Big Ten title. She topped that this season. Once again, leading Iowa and the nation in scoring, 31.9 a game, and assists, 8.9. Leading the team in rebounding at 7.3, 6 double-doubles, 9 games with at least 10 boards, 18 games with at least 10 assists, with the NCAA still to play. That's the thing, guys, to me that gets lost. People talk about her scoring and her shooting. She is one of the best passers I have ever seen in the game, regardless of gender. Clark is the only player, man or woman, in the NCAA era to record 3,000 points, 750 boards, 750 dimes in a career. She has more 30-point games than any player in the last 25 years. Again, man or woman. I mean, like you guys, I think we all became Caitlin Clark fans during last year's women's NCAA tournament. She averaged 31.8 points, 5.2 boards, 10 flat assists. She shot 48.8 from the floor, 42.7 from 3 on 12 attempts per game, 88.1 from the line on 7 attempts per game for the entire tournament, including that ridiculous 41-point triple-double. She had 10 boards and 12 assists in the Hawkeyes' 97-83 win over Louisville in the Elite Eight. That is the first 40-point triple-double in NCAA tournament history by any player, again, man or woman. We watched her drop 41 more in the Final Four win over number 1 seeded South Carolina, only to run out of gas against LSU in the national championship. You guys alluded to the numbers. The TV numbers for the tournament were record-setting. She was a huge reason why. She became the face of the tournament. It was ESPN's most watched Final Four weekend on record, averaging 6.5 million viewers. The national championship game drew 9.9 million viewers, double the audience from the 2022 championship game and the most watched NCAA women's basketball game ever. Hell, we named her our 2023 College Athlete of the Year in our year-end show back in December. That's how much of an effect she had on just our little corner of the sports world. That all carried over to this season where the talk wasn't just if she could lead the Hawkeyes back to the national championship game, but the breaking of Kelsey Plum's all-time NCAA scoring record set back in 2017, 3,527 points, which of course she did with ease. She needed just 8 points at home in front of the Carver faithful, per the Hollywood script, with a logo 3, because that's her thing, and in less than 3 minutes into the game against Michigan. When it was all said and done, she dropped 23 in the first quarter and finished with a school record 49 points, which also included a career-high 9 triples. Talk about breaking a record in style, guys. She said this after the game. Here's the quote. "You all knew I was going to shoot a logo 3 for the record. Come on now. Iowa put a Clark 22 decal on the exact spot of that record-breaking shot to commemorate the occasion for all time." Then 3 games later, on the road at Minnesota, she passed Kansas star Lynette Woodard's career point total of 3,649. Despite Woodard having a higher, here's your history lesson. Despite Woodard having a higher career point total than Plum, the NCAA doesn't recognize it because Woodard played at Kansas from 1978 to 81. The NCAA didn't accept women's athletics until 1982. Prior to that, from the late 60s until just before 1982, women's collegiate athletics was governed by the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women, AIAW. What's interesting is that the NCAA has recognized coaching wins from that era, but not player stats, and Woodard's are deserving and legit. We're talking about a 26-point-per-game scorer who was a 4-time All-American and became the first woman to have her jersey retired. She's a member of both the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame and the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. You top her point record, you're doing something. And if that wasn't enough, 1 game later, on Senior Day, as Anthony talked about, Clark topped Pistol Pete Maravich's career record on the men's side of 3,667 points, which he did in just 83 games over only 3 seasons at LSU from 1968 to 1970, because freshmen weren't allowed to play on the varsity back in those days. And he did it without the benefit of the 3-point arc or the shot clock. Makes you wonder what he would have scored if he had those options. People say 50. But even Maravich's son sees the similarities between Clark's game and his late father, saying, quote, "The long-distance shooting reminds me of my dad. She can stop on a dime and pull up from 30 feet out. She's a gifted passer, too. She's not as flashy as my dad was, but I don't know who was." Then he added, "I think he would have been a big fan of hers." Here's how ridiculous Clark is. 4 points, 0 for 9 from 3 in the first half of the Big Ten title game against nemesis Nebraska. If not for her teammates stepping up and knocking down shots off her 8 first-half assists, who knows how bad it would have been at the break. As it was, Iowa was down 11. She manages only 2 points in the third and then just flat out takes over the game in the fourth quarter and overtime, scoring 28 of her 34 points to lead the Hawkeyes to their 3rd straight title with a 94-89 win. She finished with 34 points, 7 boards, 12 assists, 3 steals, goes 5 for her last 8 on threes after that 0 for 9 start. I think Lisa Byington, who called the game for CBS, put it best. And how about this? You talk about mainstream broadcasting. That game, the Big Ten title, women's Big Ten title game on CBS, not CBS Sports, CBS. I think she put it best in describing what Caitlin Clark has meant to college basketball as a whole. Here's the quote. "She's blended men's basketball fans and women's basketball fans, and she's created basketball fans across the country, no matter the gender." End quote. Amen.
Yeah, she's been one-on-one. She's one of one. And by the way, there's a couple of similarities with Steph Curry, because with Caitlin Clark, you you literally have to guard her 90 feet because she can't pull up at any time. But also, as you mentioned that championship game, like Steph Curry, she can miss 10, 12 shots in a row and then suddenly hit two and she's red hot. I mean, those similarities are very striking. The fact that even on a cold night, it's never such thing as she may be off that she's going to be completely off for the entire game.
Here's the actual connection with Steph. She broke his record for career 3-point field goals this year.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
hey, so also can we have like maybe a rematch, like maybe like Valenescu, Curry, and just throw Caitlin Clark and maybe
I have a
Kelsey
feeling that
Plum
might
in?
happen
Like,
next. I
basically,
have a feeling it might happen next year.
I want to see Damian Lillard too. Like basically anyone who can shoot a logo three or shoot from 3/4 court should be in this competition at this point.
Hey, I mean that'll be fun, but I'll tell you this. Talk about you want to talk. Sabrina Ionescu is finally going to have some competition of her own in the WNBA's 3-point shooting contest this coming year.
Well, she'll be scared. She'll think about that after she comes back from her honeymoon. She just got married yesterday.
Oh, congrats! Yeah, congrats, by the way.
By the way, she has when she was a freshman, she had 12 games of 30 points or more, which was a record at the time over the last 25 seasons. Guess what, though? We're in such a great offensive revolution in women's basketball. That got broken this year by the woman who's going to take over college basketball, Juju Watkins of USC. I have to give Juju credit because
Absolutely.
Her stats, she might end up breaking Caitlin Clark's record, by the way she's played as a freshman.
I'll tell you, Rabbi, I give Juju credit for the same reason I give Caitlin Clark credit. Caitlin Clark stayed home. She didn't leave the state of Iowa. Juju Watkins could have gone anywhere. She was one of the most highly recruited players coming out of high school. She elected to stay home, go to USC, and resurrect that program. And Cheryl Miller recently did an interview talking about Juju Watkins, and she was asked if Juju reminds her of any player she's ever seen. And Cheryl Miller actually thought for a second and goes, yeah, me.
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah. She's going to end up being, if she keeps up.
And that's not conceit, that's not ego. That's
fact.
Yeah,
that's fucking fact.
That's fact.
That's
fact. Like I said, this is a great era of just women's college basketball because the players that we're seeing are better and the offense is getting better. Okay. Before we go tonight, let's talk about college conference tournaments. And I'm only saying that because I have this on my phone right here. Villanova 58, Marquette 58, yes. Final minute.
Yes. For a minute to go.
This is the best time of the year, and I say this week and next week are my two of my favorite weeks of the year, just because of the amount of college basketball a kid like me who has the most amount of ADD can have. College basketball championship week is the best week of the year, except on the Monday or Tuesday when Hofstra eventually loses its CAA game, and I learned again that they don't make an automatic bid. It happens almost every single time. But conference tournaments, oh my God. Big East, when Kemba Walker hit that 3 against Pittsburgh and then had one of the greatest Big East tournaments out there. Big East, when Connecticut beat Syracuse in the longest freaking game ever that went 6 overtimes. By the way, I'm just mentioning more Connecticut moments because they're my adopted team and they're looking like one of the best teams in the country this year. But I digress. College basketball championship week is an amazing experience that really should go longer, but doesn't need to go longer, or else I will be asked on why I've been watching 5 screens for the last 15 or so days. Whether it be the Big Ten tournament, usually in Indianapolis or Chicago. Unfortunately, this year it's in Minneapolis. We've already talked about that. The SEC tournament and wherever in the Southeast it happens. The Pac-12 tournament when it's in Las Vegas. Or the Big East tournament, obviously, in New York. We're one of the 700 places where the ACC tournament has been over the last 10 years.
That is my biggest gripe, Rabbi. The ACC tournament should only and forever and always be played in Greensboro. Enough with this DC and Barclays and everywhere else.
DC, Tampa, Atlanta,
I'm
Barclays.
Sorry. It belongs in Greensboro.
It's ridiculous. But all that, just seeing the crowd, seeing the different types of tournament play is amazing. Now, there's always a little question here and there. Why do these conference tournament exist? Why do these teams need to play extra games? Because you know what? College basketball is not like college football. You need a showcase before you get into the NCAA tournament. For major conferences, this is it. And it can help teams get their mojo running going into the tournament. Connecticut, by the way, was the ninth best team in the Big East that year. They rode all that momentum the year that Kemba did what he did to a national championship. Overall, though, obviously the small schools do suffer a little bit because you could have a great season in a conference like the Northeast Conference, and then all of a sudden, a 6 seed school from Staten Island by the name of Wagner comes and takes your automatic bid, and everybody's like, what did I do all of this for? This happens every single year. You're going to see a team that may have never, ever come into the tournament, win against in a college atmosphere, and win during a tournament, and then get to the big dance and probably lose in the first four in Dayton. Here's what I think about that. Yeah, sure. That's perfectly fine. Do what you want. Make your arguments about that. But doing that in a field where you have to go through these teams and usually go through them in a 3 or 4 day span, back to back to back, is almost as hard as actually going through the regular season itself. So you know what? Tough break. You prepare for this. You know this is happening. Just adjust and do your thing. 1 seeds win these conference tournaments all the time, and then sometimes they make runs. If you want to do it a different way, the West Coast Conference has always had that motto of where the best teams get double buys into the semifinals, and they only have to win 2 games where other teams have to win 3 or 4. That's why Gonzaga has been in the conference final every single year since 1999. Look it up, and they're usually playing St. Mary's, probably a 2 out of 3 chance every single time.
Hell, the Ivy League only has a 4-team conference tournament.
And the Ivy League didn't have a conference tournament until way back when. They were pretty much the last team to adjust. Yep. The Big Ten didn't adjust until the late 90s. The Pac-12 didn't adjust until the middle of the 2000s. Guess what? This is going to happen, and this is why it's one of the best times of the year. Get yourself on a stage. Get your teams getting onto a big stage before the tournament begins. And guess what? College basketball junkies fans like me love it. Jay loves it too. He actually gets to work from home now, so he gets to see some of these games. Anthony loves it too. He never misses a moment to not go to an Atlantic 10 or Big East early round games, and those tickets are dirt cheap, and I love it. You barely have to pay more than $40 for the whole experience when you do both those days. And this is the most wonderful time of the year, bar none.
And I would say this too. Going to the games, you see fans of and people like alma mater coming in to support their teams. Like you go to Madison Garden on the first day, and you won't see people coming in for the first game. You'll see them coming in to basically the second game. Like there was a lot of Georgetown alum that I got to run into yesterday evening. I came for that particular game, and obviously, just being able to be part of that experience and see the college. It's really the only time of the year I to actually go to see college basketball in person during the season. But yeah, when you watch at the college tournaments, and I've been home all week watching it. Taking some downtime from everyday work, but it's like obviously if you had a great regular season, you get rewarded with a bye or 2. But when you look at the tournaments itself, it's a showcase for the conferences. For some of the teams that are looking for, like we're watching Villanova now, a second win, a second life. To get into the tournament, just the opportunity to do just that. They can always go on a run. We've seen Cinderella teams before come out of these conference tournaments and out of nowhere make a big statement in the month of March. George Mason obviously is the team that always comes to mind that came out of our conference at the time.
I might mute you right now, so get out of the Mason vortex.
Unfortunately, unfortunately, it is the best statement of that, but also for us Hofstra alum, it hurts because they leapfrog us. Of course, that's another
Keep on
discussion.
going. Keep on going. It's
Yeah,
the Robert
but
Downey Jr. wrapping up signal right here.
yeah, but overall, I love the conference tournament. It's basically the appetizer before the main course, which is the NCAA tournament. It's just great competitive basketball. Right, we see close games. We see teams like Drake come out, make kind of come from out of nowhere and win their championship game to get in. And it always just opens the door for a Cinderella run, a small team, to make his case. And obviously, it's a showcase for some of the bigger teams. So, like championship week in college basketball for me has always been the best lead-in for the March Madness and the unpredictability of the NCAA tournament, particularly when you realize the first weekend is always the most unpredictable because we you never know. You always see teams play with house, but they go in and just you know pull off an upset or two. So like I said, like for me, championship week is just a fun. As a basketball fan in general, it's just a fun week to experience.
Yep. Look, I'm going to give you two different. I'm going to give you a for and an against, because this has been a long running debate in my family. I mean, it's always been a point of contention between me and one of my brothers, the one I do the bracket pools with. He is a staunch anti-conference tournament guy, always has been. At the power conference level, or even at certain high mid-major conferences, he feels it's all about the money, and that offends him in principle. It's rare that an outlier wins one of those tournaments, even if the top 2 or 3 seeds bow out early or is not the tournament champ. It usually doesn't affect their seeding too much. His big issue is on the basketball side and with the smaller conferences. He believes that it's bad enough that they're at a disadvantage as it is, but they don't deserve to be penalized further since they're likely to only get one bid. He feels that the regular season needs to mean something at every conference level, and that a team that is not the best in the conference shouldn't be able to win one game to make the NCAA tournament, and or the team that is the best in a conference shouldn't have their season ruined by one game by the virtue of the conference they play in before everyone's season is subject to being ruined by one game. Granted, the better the conference, this argument applies for lower and lower seeds winning the conference tournament, but even some mid-majors would only otherwise get 2 bids at most. And we talked about, Drake and Indiana State in that regard. A team shouldn't be able to win one game to make the big dance, basically rendering the prior 30-odd games meaningless. One game shouldn't salvage 4 months of being less than the best team in your conference. On the flip side, after a team lays it all on the line to be the best team in their conference over the course of 4 months, one loss shouldn't deny a team a bid, which in the smaller conferences, that's exactly what happens. Here are the examples from this year's conference tournaments that he used to make his points with me and further illustrate why he feels these conference tournaments are, to use his words, a travesty. 1, Oakland, Charleston, Moorhead, Samford, South Dakota State didn't get the luxury that Bill Self had of resting Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson in the conference tournament. Despite each of those teams just mentioned being the class of their respective conferences during the regular season, their season's hard work was worthless because they still had to run the tournament table to claim that which they otherwise had already earned because their conference will more than likely get just one bid each. Wagner and Longwood, neither could win even half of their conference games this season. Wagner was their conference's 6th seed. Longwood was their conference's 5 seed. While Longwood's 3 conference tournament wins got them to 21 overall, despite a 6-10 conference record, Wagner had a losing record before their 3-game conference tourney win streak and enters the big dance with a 16-15 record. His feeling is, other than fans of those schools, nobody should want that. I can see where he's coming from, especially in the case of the smaller conferences who historically get a single bid. The NCAA tournament is not improved by the bid thievery of such schools as Wagner and Longwood, or a top 25 team like Indiana State having to sit and wait because they didn't win the MVC tournament after winning the regular season title. That's his stance. There's merit to it. Here's mine. I've always been a big fan of conference tournaments, even though my fandom is definitively confined to the Power 6 conference tournaments. Growing up as a huge March Madness fan, which I still am to this day, as y'all know, To me, this is the most wonderful time of the year. And in an OG
We
Big East,
apologize for that singing, by the way.
I never said I could sing well. In an OG Big East city where the local program, St. John's, which I ultimately ended up going to for college, was a fixture and the de facto home team for the conference tournament, which was and still is played at Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena, where I actually got to call some of those Big East tournament games for the campus radio station, was always so very cool for me. The Friday night semifinals doubleheader, whether I was calling it or there as a fan, is one of the best nights in all of college basketball. Anthony, you know what I'm talking about. Add to that my Tar Heels fandom, which has always had me focus on the ACC tournament as a kid, and then expanded to all of championship week as I got older and became even more of an overall college basketball fan, as well as a college basketball analyst on this show. And all that goes with it leading up to my favorite Sunday, Selection Sunday. Yes, I love that Sunday more than Super Bowl Sunday, and I love Super Bowl Sunday. And the ensuing madness that follows for the best 3 weeks in sports, and you can understand why I enjoy the conference tournaments. Watching Power 6 bubble teams make or break their seasons during championship week is what the conference tournaments are all about. It's, as Anthony said, and he partially stole my line, it's the appetizer before the feast that is March Madness. And how can you not love that?
How could you be not romantic about college? Yeah, by the way, he was reacting.
How can you not be romantic about college basketball? If you're going to be romantic, this is the time of year.
Yeah, I think the rabbi was reacting to the same day I was looking at too. I'll let you, Rabbi, you can kind of fill the audience in on what we was reacting to.
We were reacting to a. Hold on. We were reacting to a possible buzzer beater in Marquette.
I'm reacting to it now on replay.
Well, it got waved off, by the way.
Oh,
just got
it was waved off. Yeah,
it was literally a split-second call. I was shocked, but it got waved off.
To quote Maxwell Smart, missed it by that much.
It was very, very close. Okay. With that all being said, instead of commenting on games that are currently going on, we could be watching them. So for Jay Kaplan and Anthony Strait, I am merely Steven Rabinowitz, a.k.a. the man without a clever bracket name in your pool. I'll be the guy that says Steven Rabinowitz's first bracket when it comes into Sunday. You come up with names. I don't care. YouTube.com/On the Sports Lines on demand if you want to watch this show or any of the other shows that we've done. Facebook.com/On the Sports Lines if you want to watch us live like you're doing right now, or also see other shows that we've done. And Jay?
Our Twitter handle, and I will forever call it Twitter, is at ONTH Sports Lines, where you will find a link to this show in the AM, and also check back occasionally for tidbits and nuggets of content from in and around the sports world that we think are worth our time to read, look at, listen to, etc. There will be plenty going on during March Madness.
We'll be back on Wednesday of next week for the official bracket preview. Fuck the first four. And with all that being said, I'm Steve Rabinowitz, guys. On the Sports Lines is done for the evening. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.